There was a time when a man's word meant something, when a promise made was a promise kept, when you could look someone in the eye, shake their hand, and trust that what they told you was the truth. But what happened to a young woman named Hannah Whitmore on Family Feud last fall would remind every viewer that secrets always come back into the light, that lies always find their way home, and that sometimes the truth has to walk onto a stage in front of 200 strangers before it finally gets told. Steve Harvey had hosted that show for over a decade. He had seen proposals on stage. He had seen reunions. He had hugged grandparents, danced with kids, and laughed alongside families from every corner of America. But on this particular Thursday afternoon, Steve Harvey would witness a moment so quiet, so still, and so devastating that even he, the man who could find a joke in any situation, would not have a single word to say. Hannah Whitmore had been engaged to a man named Caleb Ashford for almost 2 years. They were the picture-perfect young American couple. He was a real estate agent. She was an elementary school teacher. They went to church on Sundays. They volunteered at the food bank on Saturdays. They had even bought a small house together on the edge of a quiet Pennsylvania town. From the outside, their life looked exactly like the life every parent prays their daughter will have. But on the inside, Hannah had been carrying a folded piece of paper in her purse for 6 weeks. And on that paper was a secret about Caleb that not even his own family knew. Before we go any further, if you believe in stories where the truth always comes out in the end, where decent people stand up for themselves, and where real justice still finds its way through the noise, please take 1 second right now to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories that matter. The stories about real lives, real consequences, and real character. So smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another one. Now let me tell you what really happened on that stage. Because the short clips you may have seen passed around online do not even begin to show you the heartbreak that led up to that moment. They do not show you the late nights Hannah spent crying at her kitchen table. They do not show you the phone call from a stranger that changed her life forever. And they do not show you the courage it took for one quiet schoolteacher to walk onto a brightly lit television stage and finally, tell the whole truth. Hannah Whitmore was 27 years old. She had grown up in a small mountain town in central Pennsylvania, the kind of town where the church spire was the tallest thing on the skyline, where the high school football game was the biggest event of the week, and where everyone still left their front doors unlocked at night. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, was a retired police officer who had served the town for 32 years. Her mother, Alina, taught Sunday school and ran the local food pantry. They were quiet, faithful, deeply rooted people, the kind of family that did not ask for much but gave a great deal. Hannah had been raised on 3 simple rules. Tell the truth, even when it costs you. Stand up for what is right, even when you stand alone. And never let anyone, no matter how charming they seem, make you feel small. Those 3 rules had been written into her heart by her father from the time she was a little girl, sitting on the porch beside him as he sipped his evening coffee. She carried those rules with her into adulthood. She carried them into her teaching job, where she became the kind of teacher every parent hoped their child would get. And she carried them into her relationship with Caleb Ashford. Hannah and Caleb had met at a small church coffee fundraiser. She was pouring lemonade behind a folding table. He walked up, smiled the kind of smile that could melt the ice off a January morning, and asked her if she would like to grab dinner sometime. She said yes. He called the next day. He showed up on time. He opened doors for her. He spoke politely to her father. He brought flowers to her mother. He went to church with her family on the 3rd Sunday they dated. From the very first month, Caleb seemed like a dream come true. They dated for 9 months. Then he proposed. He took her to the lookout point above her hometown, the same lookout point where her parents had gotten engaged 30 years before, and he got down on one knee under the autumn maple trees. Hannah cried. She said yes before he even finished the question. They began planning the wedding for the following spring. Hannah threw herself into every detail: the dress, the flowers, the small white country church. The reception in her uncle's old red barn. Everything was beautiful, everything was perfect. Or so it seemed. But about 3 months before the wedding, something changed. Hannah began to notice small things. Caleb would step out of the room to take phone calls. He would close his laptop quickly when she walked into the kitchen. He would say he was working late on a real estate deal, and then she would drive past his office at 9 at night and the lights would be off. When she asked questions, he would smile that easy smile, kiss her on the forehead, and say, "Sweetheart, you worry too much." Hannah told herself she was just being anxious about the wedding. She told herself every couple has rough patches. She told herself to trust him. Then one rainy Thursday evening, Hannah's phone rang. The number was unknown. She almost did not answer, but something in her gut told her to pick up. On the other end was a woman's voice. The woman asked if her name was Hannah. Hannah said yes. The woman said, "I am sorry to call you like this. I am so, so sorry, but you deserve to know." Hannah's hands started shaking. She sat down on the kitchen floor. The woman told her things that night that changed Hannah forever. Things about Caleb. Things about who he really was when he was not in front of her family. Things that Hannah, in her wildest imagination, would not have believed if she had not heard the woman cry as she said them. Hannah did not say anything to anyone for the rest of that week. She did not call her mother. She did not call her sister. She did not even tell her father, who would have driven straight to Caleb's apartment that very night if he had known. Instead, Hannah did what her father had always taught her to do. She gathered the truth. She gathered the facts. She gathered the proof. She drove to a coffee shop 2 towns over and met with the woman who had called her. The woman handed her photographs. Text messages, voicemails, receipts, bank statements, an entire folder of evidence that Hannah carried home in her purse. That night, Hannah sat alone at her kitchen table for 6 hours. She read every text. She listened to every voicemail. She looked at every photograph. By the time the sun came up, she had cried herself completely empty, and then something quiet and steady settled into her chest. It was not anger. It was not panic. It was the same calm steel that her father carried with him every day on his old police uniform. It was the steel of a person who has finally seen the whole truth and has decided exactly what they are going to do about it. Hannah did not break off the engagement. Not yet. She did not throw the ring at Caleb's face. She did not scream. She did not cry in front of him. Instead, the very next day, she opened her email and saw something she had completely forgotten about. 6 months earlier, Caleb's mother had signed both their families up for a Family Feud taping. The Ashford family had a cousin who worked as a producer's assistant on the show, and she had pulled some strings. The taping date was in 3 weeks, and as Hannah stared at that email on her kitchen table, with the folded paper from the strange woman sitting just inches away from her hand, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She decided that the world deserved to see exactly who Caleb Ashford really was, and that television stage was going to be the place where it happened. The Family Feud taping was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in October. The 2 families on stage that day were the Ashford family from Pennsylvania and the Mitchell family from North Carolina. Hannah arrived at the studio early, wearing a soft cream blouse her mother had ironed for her the night before. She had on a small gold cross necklace her grandmother had given her on her 16th birthday, and in her purse, tucked carefully in a small zippered pocket, was the folded piece of paper. Hannah did not say much in the green room. She smiled politely at Caleb's family. She hugged his mother. She let his sister fix a stray hair near her ear. But on the inside, her heart was steady, and her decision was made. Caleb was his usual charming self that morning. He cracked jokes with his brothers. He flirted with the makeup artist. He squeezed Hannah's hand and whispered in her ear, "Baby, we are going to win this thing." Hannah just smiled. She nodded. She said, "Yes, we will see what happens." The producers came in to give the families their final briefing. Caleb's mother was set to be the family captain. Hannah was placed second in the lineup. Caleb was placed third. The lights dimmed in the green room. The hallway opened up. And one by one, the Ashford family walked out onto the bright television stage. The audience erupted in applause. Steve Harvey came strutting out with that big famous smile of his. He greeted both families. He shook every hand. He cracked his usual jokes, and when he got to Hannah, he paused for just a second. Steve later told an interviewer that he could feel something a little off about her, not in a bad way. He said she looked like a woman who was carrying something heavy, but carrying it with grace. He said her smile was kind, but her eyes were somewhere far away. He could not have known what was in her purse. He could not have known what was about to happen. The first round of the game went smoothly. The Ashford family was funny, lively, and quick on their answers. Caleb's mother won the buzzer. Caleb scored 2 big answers in a row and high-fived his brothers. The audience loved them. The Mitchell family from North Carolina was kind and gracious, the way folks from down south tend to be. The energy on stage was warm. Steve was rolling, and Hannah waited, calm and quiet, for the moment she knew was coming. Halfway through the second round, Steve walked over to Caleb for one of the standard get-to-know-you questions. He looked at the cards in his hand and read out loud, "Now, Caleb, my brother, I hear you and your beautiful fiancé are getting married this spring. Tell us a little bit about your love story." The audience let out a soft, sweet awe. Caleb beamed. He launched into the same polished story he had told 100 times before, how they met at the church fundraiser, how he had asked her out the very same night, how he had known the second he saw her that she was the one. The audience clapped. Steve nodded approvingly. Caleb finished by saying, "Hannah is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I cannot wait to make her my wife." Steve smiled and turned to Hannah. He said, "Well, Miss Hannah, that is one beautiful story. Anything you want to add?" The studio was quiet, ready for the typical bashful bride response. Hannah looked at Steve, then she looked at the audience. Then she looked slowly and steadily at Caleb. And then she said very softly, "Mr. Harvey, may I please borrow the microphone for one moment?" Steve Harvey, ever the gentleman, said of course. He handed her the microphone. Caleb's smile faltered for the first time. Hannah took a slow breath. She reached into her purse, and she pulled out the folded piece of paper. The audience went very quiet. Caleb's smile completely disappeared. He stepped forward and reached for the paper. He said, "Sweetheart, what is that?" Hannah did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She simply held the paper up where everyone could see it. And she said, "This is the truth, Caleb. This is what I have been carrying around for 6 weeks. This is what you thought I would never find out about. And I am so tired of carrying it alone." Steve Harvey froze. His hand was still holding the cue card. His mouth was slightly open. The studio audience seemed to hold its breath all at once. Even the cameramen, who had seen everything in their long careers, stopped adjusting their shots. Hannah did not look away from Caleb. She said, "Caleb, 6 weeks ago, a woman called me. Her name does not matter right now. What matters is what she told me and what she sent me. And what I went and confirmed for myself." Caleb's face went pale. He started to speak. Hannah held up her hand. She said, "Please, let me finish. I have waited 6 weeks to say this." Caleb closed his mouth. Hannah continued. She said, "Caleb, you have been living a double life. You have been telling me you are at work late. You have been telling me you are at real estate showings. You have been telling me you are visiting your grandmother in the next town over. But you have not been doing any of those things. You have been with another woman for over a year. The whole time we have been engaged, and the whole time we have been planning our wedding." The audience let out a low gasp. Caleb turned bright red. He started to shake his head. He said, "That is not true. That is not what it looks like. You do not understand." Hannah did not raise her voice. She just unfolded the piece of paper. And she said, "Caleb, this is a printout of 3 text messages you sent her last week. The week you told me you were on a work trip in Pittsburgh. You were not in Pittsburgh, Caleb. You were in a hotel 40 minutes from our house." The studio was now completely silent. You could hear the soft hum of the studio lights. You could hear Caleb's mother let out a small, sharp breath behind him. Steve Harvey set his cue card down on his podium. He took a step back. He did not say a single word. He just stood there watching, the way a good man watches when he knows he has to bear witness to something important. Hannah turned the paper around so the audience could see it. She did not read the messages out loud because she was too dignified for that. But she let everyone see that the paper was real and that it was unmistakably from Caleb's phone. Then she folded it back up and held it at her side. She looked at Caleb, and she said, "That is not even the worst part." Caleb shook his head and said, "Hannah, please, not here." Hannah said, "No, yes, here, because you have lied to me in private for too long." Caleb looked toward the stage exit, but Steve Harvey, without saying a word, took one small step closer to Hannah, simply making sure she was not standing alone. Hannah turned back to Caleb. Her voice stayed steady. She said, "6 months ago, you took out a loan in my name without telling me. You forged my signature on the paperwork. I have a copy of that forged document in my purse, Caleb. I went to the bank last week and pulled the records myself." The audience erupted in soft sounds of disbelief. People were openly shocked now. Some folks were holding their hands over their mouths. An older man in the 3rd row stood up and shook his head. Caleb's brother on stage took a step away from him as though distancing himself physically from what he was hearing. Caleb stuttered. He could not find any words. Because the truth, when it finally walks into the room, has no answer waiting for it. Hannah took the engagement ring off her finger. She held it up where everyone could see it. The studio lights caught on the diamond. She said, "Caleb, this ring belonged to your grandmother. She loved you. She trusted you. And so did I, but I cannot marry a man I cannot trust. I cannot build a life with a man who has been building a second life behind my back. And I cannot stand by while you continue to deceive everyone who loves you." Hannah walked over to Caleb, quietly, calmly. She placed the ring in the palm of his hand. She closed his fingers around it, and she stepped back. Steve Harvey stood very still for a long moment. The whole studio was waiting on him. The cameras were waiting on him. Caleb was waiting on him, looking small and shrunken in that dark blue suit. And Hannah, brave Hannah, was waiting on him too, with her quiet hands folded in front of her cream blouse and that small gold cross necklace catching the light. Steve walked over to Hannah. He did not crack a joke. He did not try to lighten the mood. He just walked over to her, gently took her hand, and said, "Miss Hannah, are you all right?" Hannah nodded. She said, "Yes, Mr. Harvey. For the first time in a long time, I really am." Steve Harvey closed his eyes for just a second, the way a man closes his eyes when he is grateful. Then he opened them, looked out at the audience, and said something that the whole country would later quote on every social media platform in America. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, in all my years on this stage, I have seen a lot of things. I have seen joy. I have seen heartbreak. I have seen families come together and families fall apart. But I have never in all those years seen a young woman handle herself with this much grace. Miss Hannah did not yell, she did not curse, she did not throw a single punch, she just told the truth, and the truth, my friends, is the most powerful weapon a human being can hold in their hand. Hannah, on behalf of every father who has ever raised a daughter, I want to thank you for showing this country what real strength looks like. The audience rose to their feet. Every single person in that studio stood up. They clapped for over a full minute. Hannah did not smile, she did not bow, she did not wave. She just stood there quietly the way a soldier stands at the end of a long, hard march. She was tired, she was sad, but she was free. Steve Harvey then turned to Caleb. His voice was no longer warm. It was no longer gentle. It was the voice of a man who had heard enough. He said, "Son, I am going to ask you one question. And I want you to think real careful before you answer. Did you do those things she said? Did you live a double life? Did you lie to her? Did you forge her name on a loan?" Caleb opened his mouth, then he closed it, then he opened it again, and finally, with the whole country watching, he whispered, "Yes, I did." The audience let out a collective sound of disgust. Caleb's mother covered her face and started to cry. His brothers stepped further away from him. The Mitchell family on the other side of the stage just stood there respectfully, the way decent strangers do when something terrible is happening in front of them. Steve Harvey shook his head slowly. He said, "Son, you had something special. You had a good woman, you had a good family, you had a community that loved you, and you threw it all away for a lie. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about it every single day for the rest of your life." Then Steve did something unexpected. He turned back to Hannah. He took both of her hands, and he said, "Miss Hannah, you came here today thinking you would walk away with $20,000, but I want to tell you something. You have already won the biggest prize a person can win in this life. You have won your dignity back. You have won your future back. And you have won the respect of every single person watching this taping right now." Then the doors at the back of the studio opened. And Hannah's father, Thomas Whitmore, came walking down the aisle. The retired police officer, 32 years on the force. Hannah had not known he was there. Caleb's family had told them the taping was closed to family until the end, but Steve Harvey somehow had quietly arranged for Hannah's parents to be brought in. Hannah saw her father walking toward her, and the calm steel finally cracked. She started crying, real crying, the kind of crying you only do when you are finally safe. Thomas Whitmore walked up the steps to the stage. He nodded politely at Steve. He nodded politely at the audience. He did not even look at Caleb. He walked straight over to his daughter, wrapped his arms around her, and held her the way only a father can hold his daughter when her heart is broken but her honor is still intact. He whispered something into her ear that nobody else could hear. Hannah nodded against his shoulder. Elena, her mother, came up the steps next. She hugged Hannah from the other side. The three of them stood there together, holding each other while the audience cried with them. Steve Harvey said into the microphone, "This is a real American family, this right here. This is what we are talking about, not the fake Instagram families, not the picture-perfect couples, but the real ones, the ones who show up when their child is hurting, the ones who walk through the door no matter how far away they are when the call comes." Mr. Whitmore, thank you for raising this woman. America needs more daughters like Hannah, and America needs more fathers like you. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, the response was unlike anything Family Feud had ever experienced. The clip of Hannah holding up that folded piece of paper was viewed over 30 million times in the first week. Mothers shared it with their daughters. Fathers shared it with their sons. Pastors talked about it on Sunday morning. Talk radio stations played the audio of Steve Harvey's words on repeat. Hannah received over 40,000 handwritten letters in the weeks that followed, mostly from women who said her courage had given them the strength to walk away from their own painful situations. Caleb Ashford was publicly humiliated. His real estate license came under review after the forged loan document was investigated by the state. He was charged with bank fraud and identity theft. He lost his job. He lost most of his friends. The other woman, when she saw the episode, came forward publicly with even more evidence, and a small local news station ran a follow-up segment that went viral all over again. Caleb's name became a cautionary tale that fathers warned their daughters about for years to come. Hannah moved out of the house she had bought with Caleb. She used the money she had saved from her teaching salary to put a down payment on a small cottage near her parents. Thomas helped her plant a vegetable garden in the back. Elena came over twice a week to bake bread and drink coffee on the porch with her. Slowly, day by day, Hannah began to heal. She kept teaching. Her students adored her. Many of them had no idea that their quiet, kind teacher had been the woman in the famous Family Feud clip. Steve Harvey stayed in touch with Hannah. He called her on her birthday. He sent flowers to her classroom every September on the first day of school. He flew Hannah and her parents out to Atlanta 6 months later for a special follow-up segment, where the audience gave them another full standing ovation. During that segment, Steve said something that became one of the most quoted lines from his entire career. He said, "Real strength does not yell. Real strength does not throw punches. Real strength simply tells the truth and lets the truth do the rest." Thomas Whitmore, the quiet, retired police officer from a small Pennsylvania town, became an unlikely national hero. Strangers stopped him at gas stations to shake his hand. Local fathers asked him to speak at their church men's group. He did, but only once. He stood up at the front of that small chapel in his Sunday suit, looked out at the crowd, and said 3 sentences. He said, "Raise your daughter to know the truth. Raise your son to live the truth." And never let either of them think they have to settle for anything less. Then he sat back down. The whole room stood up and clapped. Hannah eventually started a small online community for women who had discovered painful secrets in their relationships. Within a year, the group had over 60,000 members. She used most of her platform to fund a scholarship for young women going into teaching, named after her grandmother. 2 years later, Hannah met a kind young veterinarian named Samuel at a county fair. He did not have a charming sales smile. He did not bring big bouquets of roses on the first date. He just showed up on time every single time and treated her with the kind of steady honesty her father had taught her to look for. They married quietly in the same little white church where her parents had married. Thomas walked her down the aisle. Friends, the lesson here is simple. Lies have legs, but the truth has wings. A person can hide behind charm and good clothes for a long time, but the truth always finds its way home. Sometimes the truth walks onto a brightly lit stage in the form of a folded piece of paper. Sometimes the truth shows up in the calm voice of a woman who has finally had enough. And sometimes the truth is just a quiet schoolteacher in a cream blouse, refusing to be small one moment longer. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or if it made you believe again that decency and honest courage still exist in this world, please do me one favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of Hannah Whitmore. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. We will keep telling these stories. As long as you keep watching, may God bless you. May God bless your family. And may God always give you the courage to hold up the folded paper when it is your turn to tell the truth.